Hi, brown coat revolutionaries. I decided to do my presentation a little differently. I feel like its presentations are much more person engaged and a lot more open. I was tempted to do just like a voiceover with the PowerPoint showing, but I feel like whenever someone is up presenting something, it's way better to keep it simple and just say the information to you. It will be a more of a rundown, compact, not as very detailed as my paper, but I will be outlining the biggest points and views, as well as just going on a couple of examples that I think are the most important. So my paper is plagiarism, and it's academic accountability and perception among students. Plagiarism is a very, very broad topic, and so it was kind of hard to condense it into a single unit or aspect. So I decided to more focus on how we were keeping accountability for it, as well as what are the different perceptions among each other as students, as well as different cultures. I'll start first with what is plagiarism. In the deep sense, I took a couple of different papers. They all defined it differently, but they all kind of went back to the same aspect of it's purposefully taking someone's work or ideas or words and using them on your own for personal gain or motive. One of the papers that I read by an author, Chris Park, who wrote about plagiarism by university students and their perceptions, he actually took it back to many different research that he's done, and he called plagiarism the everyone's unoriginal sin. And I found it very interesting because it's something that we've all found ourselves doing at one point or another, whether it being purposefully or not. But we have taken ideas that aren't our own and restructured them in our words, or use different ideas and tasks to shift it and help us in one way or another. So it's always been something that has been there among students, and something that we've always heard of and know what it is. It's been very stressed, especially by schools and anyone who has what you would call just any sense of moral integrity or ground. So in terms of just plagiarism itself, the idea is just stealing someone's work and passing it off on your own. Next, I will see about plagiarism and its effects. I will just do, again, I have a time and a place where I will talk about different perceptions and how people view it, but its effects have always been, from the research I've done, as well as just experience, has always been associated with a negative impact or side. And plagiarism in itself has always been perceived that way unilaterally by academics, work, anywhere you've been. It's always been associated negatively, which is arguably very, very true, since everyone's their own person. Everyone has to have original ideas and ways to communicate with one another, and these ideas will bring upon greater aspects of whatever it is that you're trying to learn or teach. Because if we keep on repeating each other's ideas, obviously we would never truly get any innovation, or even find new ways of doing something or new ways of analyzing something. It would definitely just be like a round circle table, which is what all these papers have in common, is just saying that if we were to actually praise this and use this, there would be no advancement in any topics or ideas that we decide to go on. One of my main paragraphs actually is about how plagiarism has been tracked to different eras, and with different politicians and different authors and different literary geniuses, and how that's where it's been sourced. So it's been around a long time. And another one of the authors that I researched was two people by the name of G. Hura and R. Fish, who actually wrote a journal about the scholarship and teaching of learning and the students' perception of plagiarism regarding that. And they explain that these ideas have actually been around since the 17th century, and the idea of stealing work and ideas and presenting them as your own is far more common than we realize. It's not something new, but even talking with other older people who have been in education, teaching, and even just been through education in general since the 80s and 90s, this sort of effect has been pretty new. And again, we'll discuss more on how that is and why it's perceived that way. But main thing, its effects, is how do we view it with people that we respect. And just to keep it on the short note, G. Hura and Fish actually explained that when we see big figures who we respect and adore use that, or have seen them do that and think it's okay, us as students and us as learners and admirers will actually just think it's okay. And that's one of the root causes of why people just think, and students especially think, plagiarism is accepted when society's trying to make it not that way. So now, perception. Again, in my paper I went a little more deep on this, but perception in the sense is a very tricky playing field, like we were saying, as plagiarism as a whole. It's definitely not as black and white as it seems. The perception aspect of plagiarism has always changed depending on how you were raised, what moral beliefs and ethics you have, as well as what is socially acceptable in your area or culture. Clark, again, referring back to him, he also wrote a great deal about how different cultures perceive plagiarism. For example, North American students seem to have the most open view regarding it. But there's still a broad agreement between them of the negative effect, which, like I said, as the idea has been progressing, it's been more associated negatively, like I said, because everyone is hopefully deemed to have this strong moral ethic and code that prohibits us from actually being able to steal another's work and passing it off as our own. Nonetheless, a lot of South American cultures, Clark explains, they actually have very, very strict rules regarding plagiarism compared to here in North America. Doing some more research, I found that a lot of the university policy levels will change depending on the teacher, but it's mostly along the same line where if something is plagiarized, they will receive an F for the assignment, progressing to an F for the course, to even progressing as far as being kicked out of the class, or progressing even farther as to being kicked out of the institution. The way that I've noticed in South America, doing the way Clark explains it, is a lot of South American cultures will actually just kick you out outright, since their education system is mostly just based on testing to be able to get into different trade schools rather than a universal college where you can decide what to go into. They are definitely more structured in the way where trade schools are prominent and you have a certain amount of chances to get into those trade schools, and plagiarizing is always a zero effect. Meanwhile, Clark explains in China, for example, which is what is regarded as academic powerhouse, they don't really have an issue with plagiarism. It's not common at all. And in fact, students, they have such a good, strong support system. Clark explains that students actually will not even see a need to cheat, but they will help each other. But cheating is not really a big problem there, other than just helping each other. But a lot of the academics haven't really had to deal with those issues as much as they've had here. Now, moving on to perception, it will lead us into why it's a problem. Regarding um, the plagiarism, like we were saying, we all want to stay with a strong moral ethic and code, and the problem is that that prevents that from happening, which would then arguably do like a snowball effect, which would prevent new ideas from forming, new thoughts from forming, and that prevents new collaborative efforts. It's just all negative, and that's the problem that I've read and is prominent here, especially within North American audiences. And I think it really has a lot to do with accessibility nowadays, where it's so easy to cheat and so accessible that, we have such high standards set that students have no shame in going and finding something. And like we mentioned before, it's not even intentional at moments, more than just taking an idea, restructuring it, and wording it in your own words, which again we've totally seen that is okay, but a lot of the times it's perceived negatively. So we just definitely the problem that all of them mentioned, especially another paper that I researched was Lori Power, her university students' perception of plagiarism. She also mentioned that the whole accessibility issue paired with the high expectations is what usually leads students to cheat in the first place. So it's definitely an arguable point whether or not it can be fixed with just setting lower expectations or setting a bar for students, or even restructuring classes to make them easier for different learning styles for students to handle. But it's something that is definitely getting better and not at the same point, depending on the class and depending on the level of difficulty of the material. So how I want to close this really is just how big of a range plagiarism is. It's hard to just narrow it down to one root cause or one root problem, since it's something that has been progressively happening more as knowledge has been more accessible and easier to use and free. But with that also comes positives. With technology advancing, ideas are advancing, collaborative efforts are advancing, and I've also noticed, at least from personal experience, this isn't as big as an issue as it has been in previous grades, such as high school. I feel like college is such a big range of learning and diversity that everybody has a great way to say things and great ideas to portray, that it's easy. It's not easy to like plagiarize, because we all think differently and we all perceive things differently and process things differently, especially here at the college level. That I think the way that plagiarism is stressed is perfect, and I personally haven't really seen it be a big issue in any of the classes in the 2 years that I have been here. Perception wise, it's all different for everybody. Just wrapping up another main point. But we all, in order for it to be fixed, we all must work under a moral compass, which I think a lot of the universities have stressed, and that definitely helps with preventing this as much as possible. It never fully will go away, but with proper structure and proper implementation and ideas, possibly it might get to the point where it won't be an issue anymore. Thank you for your time. I know it was not as close and descriptive as I would have wanted it to be, but it's such a wide range that I feel like it was better to just give the main points and the main ideas, and that will definitely open up opportunity to discuss and questions to ask. And I would love to hear from everybody and answer any questions as best as I can from at least what I've researched, this is definitely a subjective issue. Despite its meaning and its effects in research, it's definitely still a subjective issue on how we personally perceive things and how different cultures and universities perceive it. But it's always fun to look and compare. But yeah, again, thank you. I appreciate your time, and you guys have a great one.